Hello, my name is Colin Mahler and welcome to Beaducation.com. We are here to do the charmed rope chain bracelet today, this fabulous little number. We are going to be starting by learning how to make the rope chain, and then we'll go ahead and have fun and embellish it later. This is a beginning class, so I would recommend, first of all, I recommend watching the entire class all the way through just so you know what to be prepared for. And if you want to kind of get a little more practice on the chainmail, you can always take one of our free chainmail classes. We have Intro to Chainmail and the free Byzantine class. Also, as far as embellishing this chain goes, we are doing a little bit of wire wrapping. So if you're not familiar with how to wire wrap, you may want to take Lisa Niven Kelly's Wire Jewelry Fundamentals class here on Beaducation.com. And yeah, let's go get started on making our rope chain. So this is the finished project of what we're going to be doing today. This is our charmed rope chain. And we're going to be starting by making just the chain, then we will add our clasp, and of course our charms and dangles will be last. I really have a lot of fun making these charm bracelets with a theme. I have my little garden theme up here and my celestial, and then my little hearts of love down here. And just I have a good time with the color palette. You can use pretty much any type of clasp that you like. Obviously here I have a big thing for the toggle clasps on here on this bracelet, but you can use a box clasp, always works nice, especially if it complements your beads or whatever charms that you're putting on your bracelet. And again, keep in mind that you can dangle anything and everything you want off of these bracelets. They're a whole lot of fun. And there's a lot of space to dangle things off of, so you can fill them up as heavily as you want or make it as light as you'd like to. So let's get started. Okay, so here are all the tools that you are going to need to make your charmed rope chain bracelet today. You will need one pair of regular chain nose pliers, one pair of bent chain nose pliers, like these. You will need one pair of round nose pliers and one pair of flush wire cutters to make your dangles, your beaded dangles for your bracelet. So here are all the materials you're going to need to make your charmed rope chain bracelet. You will need two different sizes of jump rings. We're going to construct the main part of the bracelet itself is going to be made from the 5mm 18 gauge jump rings. We'll need some 3mm 18 gauge jump rings, and both these measurements are taken off the inside diameter of the jump ring, not the outside diameter. The 3mm rings we're going to be using to attach our charms and dangles and probably our clasp as well. You will need a clasp of some sort. We're going to be using just a basic toggle clasp. You can use a box clasp, a big lobster claw, really whatever type of clasp you like. An assortment of charms and or beads, and I've already wire wrapped my beads. They're all ready to go. If you do not know how to do a wire wrapped bead, you may want to check out Wire Jewelry Fundamentals with Lisa Niven Kelly. It's one of our classes here on Beaducation.com, so you can learn how to make these if you don't already know how. And last but not least, you will need a handy dandy paper clip to hold your chain as we are starting to create it. Before we can actually start constructing our chain, we're going to need to prep our jump rings. We're going to need to close two of them and then open up all the rest. So we're going to start by going over how to properly open and close your jump rings. Now when you get your jump rings, they're neither all the way open or all the way closed. They're kind of somewhere in between. So we need to either open them up further or close them up all the way. I am using my chain nose pliers and my bent chain nose pliers. I'm right-handed, so I use my chain nose pliers in my right hand and my bent chain nose pliers in my left hand. I use my bent chain nose pliers more as my stabilizing plier, and my chain nose pliers tend to be more my manipulating plier. So I'm going to take my jump ring and I'm going to place it in my bent chain nose pliers with the opening of the jump ring up at the 12 o'clock position. And I'm going to grab the other side of my jump ring with my chain nose pliers. Now notice the way that I'm grabbing my jump ring. I'm not grabbing here with the tips of my pliers. I don't want to manipulate my jump ring with the tips of my pliers if I can help it. I want to hold on to my jump ring with as much of my plier surface as I can. This will help keep your jump rings nice and flat, and it will keep them from warping and looking a little strange in your chain. So I'm going to grab the other side of my jump ring, and I'm just going to give it a twist away from me about 1/4 of a turn. And that gets your jump ring all nice and open, just like that. So now we're going to close our 2 jump rings. And to close your jump rings, again, you're going to place your jump ring in your bent chain nose pliers, right at the bend of the plier, with the opening up at the 12 o'clock position again. And I want to grab the other side with my chain nose pliers. And I'm going to be rocking the 2 ends of the jump ring back and forth to try and work the 2 ends closer together and close up that little tiny gap. So I'm going to rock the 2 ends back past the point where they meet. Back again, and as I'm rocking these 2 ends back and forth, I'm exerting a very gentle inward pressure, again trying to close that gap between the 2 ends. Oh, there we go. So if you heard that little click, that was the 2 ends hitting each other, which means that they're butted up against each other, they're nice and flush. Now all I need to do is kind of give the 2 ends a little wiggle until I get everything to line up nicely, like so. Now ultimately, after you've had some practice, you shouldn't really be able to see the seam in your closed jump rings. You should be able to close them that well. But again, it takes a little bit of practice. And don't rely on hearing the click of the 2 ends of the jump ring hitting each other. We'll go do another one here. Sometimes you don't hear the click. Sometimes you just see that the 2, or you can feel it through your pliers that the 2 ends are hitting each other. So once again, I've got my jump ring in my bent chain nose pliers. I've grabbed the other side with my chain nose pliers, rocking the 2 ends back past the point where they meet, back again, and again, oh, and I just felt the 2 ends hit each other. So now I'm gonna just line them up, like so, and once again, oops, nice closed jump ring, can't really see the seam in that. So there you have your 2 closed jump rings, and you want to go ahead and open all the rest of your jump rings, and we'll be ready to put our chain together. All right, to start our chain, we're going to need 1 of our open jump rings and both of our closed jump rings. Oops. And I'm going to take both of these closed jump rings, put it on my open ring, and then close this ring up. Like so. So now I have 2 jump rings hanging off of 1, and I'm going to take another of my open jump rings. I'm going to put it through those 2 closed rings again and close this up. And if you grab onto the 2 closed rings and let the other 2 fall down, then you have a little section of 2 and 2 chain. So you have 2 jump rings attached to 2 jump rings. And here's where your paper clip comes in. Take your paper clip and attach it to either pair of rings. Now our paper clip just gives us something to hold on to while we start our chain, and it kind of lets you know what direction you're moving in when you are building the chain. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take these 2 pairs of rings, and I'm going to kind of push them together, slide them all together, and this will create a common center between all 4 rings. Okay, so here is the space I am talking about. Can you see that? Everything wants to move. So I have an awl here. I'm just going to go ahead and poke it through this space, which will hold it open for me. So can you see that? I hope so. So where the awl is where I'm going to be placing my next 2 jump rings. Now this is a double rope chain, which means that each link consists of 2 rings. Pull that out. Now I'm using an awl, but you can also use just a piece of wire or something to stick into that space and hold it open for you. So now I'm going to take another open jump ring, and I'm going to go through all 4 of those jump rings in that space that I have created. It's a little clumsy, but it got the job done. And I'm going to close this ring up. Like so, and then I'm going to add 1 more jump ring in that same space. Making sure that I don't cross over the jump ring I just put in there. I want them to lay side by side. I don't want them to be twisted up on each other. So, and then close that ring as well. Okay, so here's the start of our chain. Doesn't look like much yet, but it will, trust me. Okay, so now we have a nice big space. We don't need any sort of tool to show us where our next 2 rings are going to go. They're just going to go straight into that very obvious hole right there. So I'm going to take another open jump ring. I'm going to put it through all 4 of those rings. So every time we add a link, we're always going through the last 2 pairs of rings on the end of the chain, going through a total of 4 rings. And I'm always adding 2 to each link. So there's my first ring. And I'm going to add the second ring to this link. Again, so here I have caught up the ring that I've already added, which I just said that I don't want you to do. So I'm going to undo this and put it back in without going through that ring. There we go, like so. And now I'm going to close this ring. Okay, so now we are 4 links into our chain, and this is what it will look like. Okay, so this is our 5th link or 5th pair of rings that we're going to be adding, and this one is a little bit tricky. The 2nd and 3rd pairs of rings that we've added kind of twist up together, and it makes for a very tight space between the 3rd and 4th pair of rings. So what I'm going to try and do here, put my tool down, both of them, is I'm going to pinch just underneath the 3rd pair of rings here, 3rd pair of rings away from our paper clip, and try and push it up towards that 4th pair of rings so I can find the space that I need to go through. And this is a little tricky and the space will be a little tight, but once we get past this, it'll be pretty easy going. So here is my 3rd pair of rings, my 4th pair of rings is here. Just need to find the space between the 3rd and 4th pair of rings. These awls are really sharp, by the way. Don't poke your fingers with the tips. So there we go. So now I have the 4th and 3rd pair of rings on the awl, and that's the space I want to go through. Again, you can leave the awl, or if you have a piece of wire in there, you can leave that in there until you get your first ring in. I'm going to pull my awl out though, and I'm going to pick up an open jump ring, and I'm going to go through that space I just created between the 3rd and 4th pair of jump rings. Oops. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and close this ring up. Like so. And I'm going to add my second ring there. And close it. All right, so now we are 5 links into our chain. And right here, you should be able to see the next space you're going to go through. Pick up my awl and point it out. So you're going to go through these last 2 pairs of jump rings with 2 rings. And at this point, your chain, it's kind of a wash, rinse, repeat. You're just going to keep going. So I have the space between the last 2 pairs of rings on the end of my chain. I'm going to go through that space with 1 jump ring, close it up, and add 1 more open ring. And close it. Okay, now I have 6 pairs of rings on my chain. So we're just going to keep going in this same fashion until our chain is just about as long as you want it to be. Don't forget that you will need to add the length of your clasp that you're going to be using into the final length of your chain. You don't want to make your chain too long, because once you add the clasp, you may have to undo some of the chain that you worked so hard to make. All right, and you can see it's starting to see the pattern forming here. Now on the double rope chain, it automatically starts to twist. You can make a single rope chain as well, just using 1 ring per link, but on the single rope chain it doesn't hold its twist, and you actually have to twist the chain to put a twist into it before you put it on. So I like the double rope chain because it just kind of holds its spiral form. All right, so just keep on going until your chain is as long as you need it to be. All right, so I have made a little bit more of my chain here. As you can see, it's starting to look like a spiral, little rope chain. And you're just going to keep on going again until your chain reaches the length that you need it to be before you put your clasp on. So I wear my bracelets at about 7 inches. So I have laid my chain out here against my foldy ruler. And the chain itself, and as you can see, I've also laid out the clasps so I can get a better idea of how long the final length will be. Now my chain measures just about 6 inches, and then once I add the ring on the toggle on, it should be about 7. I may want to add a couple more links here, but probably not. Because I'm going to use the 3mm rings to attach either end of my clasp to the ends of the chain. So that's going to give me a little tiny bit extra length, which will probably bring me to right about 7 inches. Now, when you're using a toggle, you don't want to measure the bar end of your toggle because it doesn't take up any length on your chain, but you do want to measure the ring. If you're using a box clasp, you'll just take the box clasp, keep it both ends secured together, and then lay it out at the end of your chain. Same goes for like a lobster claw or something like that. You will want to make sure you have a ring on one end of your chain, and then you can lay your lobster claw out on the other end to get that measurement. So once I have gotten this to the length I want it to be, now we can go ahead and add our clasp. Take that away. So you can go ahead I don't think I mentioned this already, but you can go ahead and open up all of your 3mm rings. And you can use your 5mm rings to attach your clasp to the end of the chain. I'm just going to use the 3mm. The smaller the ring is, the more secure it is. And especially at the ends of your chain where your clasp is, that's kind of where you get the most wear and tear on your piece. So you want to make sure you have a nice secure connection between your chain and the clasp. So I have an open 3mm ring here. I'm going to link it through the last pair of rings on the end of the chain. I've already taken my paper clip off. So just one pair of rings you're going through. And I'm going to go ahead, put my toggle on, close this ring. Like so. And I'm going to go over here to the other end of my chain and attach the other end of my clasp. Now sometimes on a toggle clasp, depending on how large the ring is, on this one the ring is large enough we can probably get away with attaching the bar end of the clasp with just a single ring. Test that out in a moment. But if you're having trouble pulling the bar up through the ring of the toggle, you may want to add 2 or 3 of these small jump rings when you're attaching the bar end of the clasp, so you just have some room to pull it up through the ring. Now we're going to test this out. Make sure, yep, everything's okay, fits nicely. And now that I have this attached, I'm going to take it and you can either put it around your wrist or lay it out against your ruler. See how long it is with the clasp on. And yep, we're just right about at 7 inches. It should fit perfectly. So my charms are all laid out here and ready to go. I'm ready to actually start putting them onto my bracelet. And if you have a plan and you want, say, this big heart charm to be right in the middle of your bracelet, you probably want to start adding your charms from the center and then work your way out. But if you're just kind of throwing beads on there and charms and you don't necessarily have any sort of set pattern that you want to do, you can start from one end and work your way down. So it kind of depends. How you add your charms on will depend on what your plan is. But again, if you have a set pattern that you want, then I would start in the middle and work your way to either side. So I'm going to move all this out of the way. So I'm going to start in the middle. Now I'm just going to lay this out straight. I can either count how many sets of rings I have and actually count my way to the middle, or I can just kind of eyeball it. This kind of looks like center to me. So you can pick it up with your pliers and find if you are, well, that's not quite exact center, and it doesn't have to be exact. It can be relatively in the center. I'm just gonna scoot down here and see if I can get this more centered. Go over here. Oops, if I could hold on to everything. So that's, again, not quite in the center, but approximately. So I'm gonna lay this out again. My center was about here. Now what I wanna do as I'm adding my charms on is I really want to add all my charms onto the same set of rings all the way down. So I want all my charms to sit on the same side of my bracelet, I guess, so they all hang nicely and dangle nicely once they're all on the bracelet and hanging on your wrist. So here about is my center. I'm just going to go ahead and add my center charm here so I can mark it, and then we'll move on from there. I'm going to take my 3mm jump ring, put my charm onto it, and then I'm going to hook it onto the pair of rings that I have chosen. Okay, so there's my oops, first little charm, big charm, about in the center of the bracelet. Now, what I want to do is, and again, I can either just kind of eyeball this and look to see if I move over to this next set of rings to the right here. It's on the same plane, it's got the same orientation as the rings that I already hooked this center charm into. The other thing I can do is I can count how many pairs of rings over it is. So if I count 4 pairs of rings over from where I've put this charm, it will bring me back around to the same spot on my chain. So not counting the pair of rings that your charm is attached to, I'm going to start with the next pair over from that. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4 will bring me back around to the same spot on my chain. And I'm going to go ahead and add my little beaded dangles here. I'm going to use a little cluster of 3, and I'm going to attach them to my 3mm jump ring and then onto the chain. And I highly recommend that you wrap all of your beads ahead of time so you're just ready to put them all on when you're done with your chain. Again, here's my charm. 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of rings over brings me back around to the same spot on the chain. Take my 3mm jump ring with my beads on it and hook it through that pair of rings and close up this small ring. There we go. Now I'm going to come back around for here, and to double check, I'll just count 1, 2, 3, 4. Find that 4th pair of rings again. And I'm going to add another little charm. And if your charms have a front and a back, you will probably want to pay attention to what direction you're adding these charms in. You don't want your charms to be hanging backwards necessarily. If they're all hanging in one direction, you want to make sure they all hang in the same direction. But that only matters if they have a front and a back. If they're double-sided, then it doesn't matter at all. Ooh. So there's my first 3 little dangles, and I'm just going to continue adding my beads and charms down one side, and then I'll come to the other side of my bracelet and add all my charms and beads over there. All right, so now I have finished adding all my charms and beads onto my bracelet, and it turned out pretty well. Not quite on center here, but pretty close. If you're a perfectionist, I highly recommend that you actually count your way to the exact center so that it works out evenly in the end here. And as you can see, I do have a couple of charms here that do have a front and a back, such as this one, and I made sure that it was facing front. These little double hearts are kind of two-sided as well. So again, I just tried to make sure that all the charms were facing in the same direction. If you don't want to add quite so many charms or beads, you could go every 8 links over, and that will kind of skip, say, this center section here. So you could go from charm to charm and just leave that space empty. Or you can add beads to every link, or really whatever you'd like to do. Really the possibilities are endless. So take out your beads and your charms and anything else that you have to dangle off your bracelet, and have a great time. All right, well, thank you for joining me here today at Beaducation.com, and I hope you had a great time making your charmed rope chain bracelet. Have fun making many others to enjoy and give away as gifts. If you have any comments or feedback for us, please feel free to contact us here at Beaducation.com. Thanks, see you next time.